getting back to your question, I would like to speak about the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance. There's, you know, the underlying problem, because that was the body set up in 1997 that was meant to assess the benefits and risks of through clinical trials and know which ones should be promoted to the public, etc. They set that body up, and Professor Peter McIntyre was the deputy director in 1997, and he became the director in 2004, and he was still the director in 2017, and then he resigned. But you've got somebody controlling and Robert Bowie has been there for that same length of time as well, pretty much the same length of time. So you've got two people controlling all of this, you know, organisation for 20 years. I see that as a problem for getting different, you know, debating evidence and actually getting different perspectives into these organisations. You know, why have we had someone in those bodies for 20 years? You know, that's one point I want to make. And most of the people on that board have had conflicts of interest that have led to biased decisions when they've voted. We also have a group called the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation. Now, that group was set up by the World Health Organization. That was what I discovered in my PhD as well. Every member country, so it's about 194 members, have an ATAGI, a national, so ours is the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation. So they're getting their directives and recommendations from the World Health Organization. So from 2000 and, well, ATAGI was set up, I learned, in 1997 as well. And then in 2005, it was Professor Terry Nolan who became the chair of ATAGI. But for 15 years prior to that, he was working at the Murdoch Children's Institute for Health, manufacturing. They had set up there in 1990 the largest research and development program for in Australia. And Terry Nolan headed that organisation. It was called Virgo. So Rupert Murdoch, who had donated to the Murdoch Children's Institute of Health. But remember, getting back to how I started the interview, in 1986, the US removed all liability from any drug that's called and that's promoted to the public. So by 1990, Australia, here we are, we set up this big research and development program. And then by 15 years later, Professor Terry Nolan goes in and he's the chair of ATAGI in the Australian government. As the chair, he was recommending directly to the health minister which should be put on the program. And that information was coming directly from the WHO. So he was in that role for 10 years. And as it got up to 2014-15, there was a lot of pressure put on by parents, by myself and Elizabeth Hart and many others. We were writing saying, why aren't the conflicts of interest written on that website? So in December 2014, Terry Nolan resigned as the chair, and he went back to the Virgo program at the Murdoch Children's Institute of Health, and then they publicised conflicts of interest in 2015 was the first time any conflicts of interest for those members were publicised. So these are the things that are happening, and you know, all of the boards now have so much conflicts of interest on them. They're literally, it's biasing the decisions that are being made on those boards. And you see, even when they put a consumer on the board, they suss them out first. And of course, everybody wants to be pro. I mean, you're not going to get on the board if you talk about risks of a. So in the end, you're putting on a consumer that they know will vote for the. And you know, so you've got that groupthink happening again. The groupthink is there, and ultimately, what we've got is really organisations that are a facade for the pharmaceutical companies now, and they're masquerading as government boards. I mean, look at APRA, the Australian Health Practitioners Regulatory Authority. You know, it's enforcing doctors to violate their medical ethics if they stand up for informed consent to. they're out, and it's not just out. They get tormented and investigated for 4 years or more. It drags on, and there's been many suicides of doctors. This was all brought up at the AMPS, a conference that happened in May last year. You know, many doctors have committed suicide since all APRA has been operating. And, you know, APRA is a corporate board. They're not a government board. They're a corporate board set up through the Queensland Senate, and then apparently get, you know, jurisdiction of all of Australia. You know, they're forcing doctors to violate medical ethics because it's in the best interest of the pharmaceutical industry. They're making money for the medical industry.